460 08 77.
Только меня не слышно. Вот сейчас меня уже слышно. Спасибо, Олечка. Здравствуйте всем, кто сейчас настроен на радио RUSA. Сегодня вторник, и я по вторникам всегда очень люблю сказать «Thank God it's Tuesday», «Thank God it's Tuesday», потому что с нами по вторникам величайший раввин нашего времени, раввин Менис Фридман, который уделяет нам вот это драгоценное время и отвечает на жизненно важные вопросы, которые сейчас у всех на уме, на душе, и вообще время у нас не совсем спокойное, поэтому спасибо ему огромное, что он к нам присоединяется. И сейчас я хочу сказать сразу же ему с ним поздороваться и пригласить его к нам в эфир. Rabbi Manis Friedman, Tuesday is the best day of the week for sure for me, 100%. We're very, very excited to have you with us on the radio once again every week. It's a treat, and thank you for your time. The time now is a nervous time, and the worst part about it is we don't know where the truth of today is. We're watching this Democratic convention, the Republican convention, and everybody is saying their own thing. And how do we filter it out? How do we know where the truth lies? Because life got very, very confusing, and it's not getting any better at the moment.
It's like somebody said, you can't trust the newspapers because half of what they say is false and the other half is not true. So you really can't know from reading newspapers, right? If we want to know where the world is going, we have to look at the morality of the world, not the conventions, the political rallies. What's happening with the morality in the world? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? And for that, you don't need newspapers. Look around. In your neighborhood, in your family, are people trying to be better? Do people want to be better? Are people getting better? The answer has to be yes.
It would be great if it was yes. I'm not so sure right now.
And it would be terrible if the answer is no. We would have nothing left to hope for. But when in doubt, we have to assume the positive. It's the only rational, intelligent thing to do. So people are getting better. In fact, the lack of truth and the lack of honesty and the lack of morality that we see in the news and the media is almost encouraging us, forcing us to become better. Because when you see how bad it is when you're not good, right? If you're not good, you're bad. When you see how bad it is, you want to become better. You want the world to become better. So if the morality is getting stronger, then we're in good shape. Politics is falling apart, so what? But we have to raise our moral standards. And that doesn't come in dramatic ways. Morality is not dramatic. It's a very tiny difference between the truth and a lie. There's a very tiny difference between cruel and kind. So we have to focus on that. Never mind what the news says. Be nice, be good, be moral, and mainly be honest. Tell the truth.
Rabbi Friedman, it's ideal for people to tell the truth, but they don't. I mean, I understand that it's politics, but politics is who we depend on, politicians. They're the ones who are right now our leaders. We'd like to have better leaders, but that's not an option at this particular second. How do we trust the leaders that we have right now? Um, we have elections very soon. We have to know where the truth is, how to find the truth, vote for the truth, preferably. And this is where we are at right now. We still have to listen to the media, we still have to listen to the politicians. But how do we filter that truth?
I think it would be helpful if we started judging people by their acts and not by their words or reputation. Look at the act, look at the behavior. If people don't behave right, it doesn't matter how nicely they speak. It's the behavior that counts. And it's hard to know with the unreliable reporting. It's even hard to know what people or the politicians or the people running for office, it's hard to know what they did or didn't do. We can't even get that straight. But the media, all it talks about is this one said this and this one said that. Words don't matter. They really don't. We've made a big deal about how to speak properly. The speech police. We've made speech more important than action, and that's not acceptable. Look at people's behavior, not at their speech, because very good people can say foolish things, and very bad people can say beautiful things. So skip the words, skip the speech and the noise, and look at the behavior.
That would be great. And we've been seeing a person of action in the last 4 years, yet all his actions are being skewed and denied. So, again, where is the truth? We do see actions, but they're being misinterpreted.
So do your own interpreting. Don't listen to the spin. So again, it's just words. Words trying to change the facts. So forget the words. Look at the behavior.
Rabbi Friedman, I can't help but bring the teachings of Tanya into this situation, which teaches us to perceive things a certain way in order to react to things in accordance to that. In other words, we can create our own reality. Jews are known to have so many tools where we can control ourselves, have better control of our minds and our feelings. And for that, of course, we have to interpret the reality of today. So the emotions and the perception is in a positive, comes out positive. And so our lives are better, basically. However, in a way, this is what is happening in reality. People are trying to put a certain perception on what is happening today in the world in order to create a certain reality. So this is where this fine, scary line begins, that different people, different realities, there's no majority, there's no minority. It is such a split, and what makes it very scary is what kind of outcome we're going to have. And most likely that outcome we're waiting for is in November.
Well, it seems pretty predictable that politically, however the voting is going to go, there's going to be political chaos because nobody really is interested in stability and truth and progress. It's all about winning. So, yes, there's going to be political chaos. But under the chaos, what are people going to do in fact? Which candidate is going to do the right thing, not say the right thing? So the biggest danger is that we listen. Stop listening. Don't hang on every word and don't interpret everything, that's being said, because it means nothing. I mean, one candidate, I forget who it was asked, how do you suddenly change your mind when you were running, when you were campaigning? You were saying the exact opposite. And she said, yeah, well, that was just campaign talk. there's no shame. There's no attempt at justification. Yeah, that was campaign talk, which means when you're campaigning, you lie. You say whatever you need to say. It doesn't matter. Don't believe campaign talk.
I don't
That's
think
nice
that's a
to know.
single case. I believe in politics we have a lot of cases like that, and again, and then the media takes it and turns it around even more. And what can a simple person do? What should simple?
When does campaign talk stop?
Yes. And does the truth ever kick in?
Right. Not in politics. So it turns out like this. When it comes to the morality, the people have to create the morality, not the politician. In other words, we will get the politicians that we tolerate, that we approve of. So if our own morality is not strong, that's the kind of leadership we're going to get. So instead of worrying about their morality, we should strengthen our own morality. And then we will immediately identify misbehavior when we see it, because we're focused. But when we ourselves are a little hazy about our morality, well, the wolves will take full advantage of that. So I think we've spoken many times, and I just heard it quoted by the early founding fathers. You cannot have a democracy that isn't based on absolute value. And absolute value comes only from the Torah, or what they call the Old Testament. That's the only source for absolute value, for right and wrong, good and bad. Nothing has ever replaced that. You can come up with different philosophies, with different theologies, but right and wrong, it has never changed since the Ten Commandments. So without the foundation of Torah morality, and that's the only way to really describe it, without that as a foundation for our country, we are not a democracy. We're just people trying to win. And that's bad news.
Rabbi Friedman, in January, President Trump said that he'd like to reinstate prayer in public schools rather. This is something that the rabbi has very much enforced, embraced. Thought it would be an amazing thing to happen. It didn't happen because of COVID, of course, and because of the life that we're living right now. However, is there truth in all religions? So obviously we have to be respectful of all faith, all religions. But how would that actually work in schools? Will there be that one truth if there's going to be God in our society? I mean, what is happening is actually people who are more conservative are going towards President Trump and towards the Republican Party because it is more about God. So it seems like people do want more God in their lives. However, there's right and wrong when it comes to God as well, unfortunately, because there are so many ways to approach God. So where's the truth in that?
See, that itself would be a vast improvement. If we would at least argue about what God said, which means we're concerned with the morality of our society. That would be good. So as far as the Rebbe, he would like a moment of silence if you can't have a prayer. If you can have a prayer, it should be something as simple as "In God we trust." Who objects to that? Who disagrees with that? But even a moment of silence, which is a brilliant idea, because what it says is that let's take out a moment and think. What are you going to think about? It's so, we are so thoughtless that if you say, let's think for a moment, people panic. Think? What should I think about? And what happens when you think? What happens when you say, let's take a moment and think? Good things happen. The problem is we don't stop to think. But the average person, if you say to the average person, take a moment and think, it's almost predictable that the thoughts will immediately go to, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing? That is so good. So imagine that in the public school, grade school, a 10-year-old is told that at the beginning of the day, there will be a moment of silence, a time to think. Naturally, the 10-year-old is going to say to think about what? You see, we've already improved vastly. Because what is the teacher going to say? Think about what? Most teachers will say, ask your parents, because we're not allowed to tell you what to think. So they'll come home and they'll say, in the morning, at the beginning of the day, we are told there's a moment of silence when we're supposed to think. What should we think about? Now the parents are in the hot seat. What are the parents going to say? Think about baseball? Think about your electronic game? It's going to change the atmosphere in the home. Every day, there's a moment of silence. Think what? That itself would be so good. In fact, I was talking to a chief of police in a district in California, in LA. He wanted to know what can the police do to improve things, because they seem to have become the villain. This guy was a very nice guy, very sincere. He really wanted to do something different, do something good. I suggested that every policeman should visit a school daily, rotate, come into the different classrooms and sit down with young children and talk about morality. Not about police, about morality. Like, for example, what kind of a neighborhood would you like to live in? What would you like to see happening in your neighborhood? Get together with community leaders, citizens. Ask them, what kind of a community would you like to have? And we'll help you out. We'll back you up. But you tell us what your morality is.
Rabbi Friedman, but do you think it would work in such a split society? Because some people want opposite things. Some people want to defund the police, and others want to strengthen the police. So where's that common ground that we can agree upon?
Well, here's where the police themselves, are kind of caught in an uncomfortable, impossible situation. They make the law and they enforce the law. People don't want to tolerate that. And they're right. It's not the way it was meant to be. Police don't make laws. That's a police state. The people make the laws, and then they hire the police to enforce the laws that they like. The people. So just a simple example, I have to go to the extremes. You get together with community leaders and you say, we find this 14-year-old walking the streets in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning. What do you want us to do? Stop him and ask him where he's going, or just let him go? You tell us, what is your moral standard? And we'll fill it in. We'll support it. But you tell us, you want 14-year-olds walking around at 2:00 at night? Yes or no? So if we stop your teenager and harass him about being out in the streets, will you thank us or will you shoot us? So you tell us what kind of a society you want. We are civil servants. We can't make laws. You make the laws.
The problem is with those who create the laws are also people who also have special interests and create the laws accordingly to those special interests. So,
You mean the politicians?
of course.
But again, the morality has to come from the people, not from those that the people elect or hire. They're supposed to be serving us, the people. Now, it's been a long time that we've been amoral. Not immoral, amoral. And what that means is we took morality for granted. If you let it go, if you take it for granted, that's amoral. And of course, gravity will pull it down. It won't get better, it will get worse. So we have to stop being passively moral. We have to become actively moral. And then the politicians and the police will have no choice but to rise to the morality of the people.
How do we become actively moral?
You see, that's why the Torah is our last hope. Our first and last hope. It was always our hope, and it still is. That's the morality. If we were to ask ourselves, what does God want? What does God think is right or wrong? It's the only way. In other words, and this is really profound, we keep looking at the world through our own eyes. I look at the world, what do I see? A lot of mystery. And even the religious people say, yes, God works in mysterious ways, which basically means I don't understand what's going on. It sounds very sophisticated. You know, all I'm saying is I don't understand what's going on. And to say, well, God runs the world, that's not good enough. That's almost like surrendering to the chaos. Leave it to God. God knows what he's doing. Then I might as well not exist. He knows he's doing it. I'm out of the picture. That's not a moral person. That's certainly not partnering with God in creation. So what do I need? Of course, God knows what he's doing. But my job is to understand what God is doing and participate. Be a partner. If I don't understand what he's doing, how am I supposed to be a partner?
Is it possible to understand when people have never learned? And
Right. Ignorance is not good for children and other living things. Ignorance is dangerous. So I think it's so, when you get right down to it, it is so simple. Ask the average teenager on the street, what are the 10 Commandments? If they don't know the answer, we're in trouble. You need no further investigation. We know we're in trouble. What are the 10 Commandments? I'm not even asking you to name them. Just tell me what they are. When you say 10 Commandments, what are we referring to? Something in the Constitution?
the main laws?
They don't know. So, you're right. Ignorance leaves us completely helpless. We are helpless.
It just doesn't seem like we have a solution. I mean, we do, but can we get to that solution quickly enough before bad things start to happen? I mean,
Before they start happening?
worse things start to happen. Because obviously it seems like this is the reason we are where we are. It seems
Yeah.
that the world is where it is today is because of this ignorance.
Yeah. I was sitting on a plane next to a evangelical missionary. I don't know if that's redundant, but very successful, very popular. But the family had a problem. Their 14-year-old daughter was arrested for shoplifting. And I'm talking arrested. She didn't walk out with a candy bar. She walked out, or tried to walk out, with $400 worth of merchandise. A very sophisticated plan that she had. Working with a woman at the cash register, they made a whole plot. And they almost got away with it. But they caught him, and it was a serious, serious crime. Now, the mother says, you understand how embarrassing this is for us. I mean, here we are preaching God, religion, Bible, and our daughter engages in such criminal behavior. So I asked her, did you ever tell your daughter that God does not accept or allow stealing? She says, no, we don't talk like that. We don't speak about rules and laws. We taught her to love God. I said, then it's your fault. Take full responsibility for this. You never told her that it's wrong to steal. So why are you surprised? Yes, you taught her to love God. And because she loves God, she is sure that God will allow her to get away with this crime. After all, God is so loving. So we've taught our children nothing unless you go back to the Ten Commandments. And even with the Ten Commandments, if you don't convince the children and yourself that these commandments are crucial, not for us, but for the commander. It's not just good advice. Play nice, get along, and you'll all be happy. That's childish. Of course, we'll get along and play nice, as long as you do it my way. Because my way is better. So there you go. Let's all make nice. I am making nice. You're not. No, I am. You're not. Okay. So
Okay,
where we go?
you just described the political arena.
Yes. Yeah. Or even worse, in the political arena, I'm not here to play nice. I'm here to win.
Mm-hmm.
It's out in the open now. Not even playing any game anymore. It's my way. That's it. Whether it's nice or not nice, right or wrong, my way. That song, by the way, that very famous Frank Sinatra song.
I did it my way.
And it's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
But the message is so corrupt. I did it my way. And you're proud of that? Much more than this. I did it my way. Shame on you. Narcissistic, amoral message. Anyway, so here's the point. If we don't tell our children right from wrong, why are we shocked and dismayed when they're wrong? And they will be wrong. Because if you neglect morality, you have immorality. There's no in between. It's like a Yiddish expression that says, a little lie is a little truth is a large lie. If I tell you only a little truth, that's a big lie. There's no in between. There's very little gray area between right and wrong, between beautiful and ugly. So it's very simple. It really is very simple. What kind of society do you want? And don't do it piecemeal. Well, that I don't like. I object to that kind of talk. In what society are you thinking? In whose world is that talk unacceptable? It's got to be the whole package, not one piece at a time. It's like when Abraham goes down to Egypt and he tells his wife to say that she's his sister. Why? Because in Egypt, they don't believe in adultery. They're very careful about not committing adultery. So if they like a woman who is married, they kill the husband. It's not adultery anymore. See, that kind of piecemeal morality doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's worse than nothing. So we have to have a picture of life, not one thought or one principle at a time. And that's what the Torah gives us. Not a few good thoughts or a few good moral principles, an entire life with a consistent morality. So that when you tell your child, that talk is not acceptable, it makes sense because it's consistent with everything else you teach them. That's the education we need.
My favorite story about this is when an African American woman was in the store with her child, and the child, about 3, 4 year old, and the child reached for something. Right away, she would tell him, not kosher. And a religious lady came up to her and says, "Really, you're an observant Jew?" She says, "No, but it seems to work for you." So, um, yeah.
But it wouldn't work out of context. It's got to be in context.
Right.
I got that horrible story about a Nazi who worked in the concentration camp, killing people, gassing people, incinerating people all day long. And he came home and found out that his dog had been hit by a car. He was morally outraged. He couldn't understand. How can people be so cruel? Now, what are his children supposed to think about their father? Such a sensitive soul, crying over the death of a dog. But what does he do all day long? Come on, this is not going to work. It's worse than nothing. The hypocrisy is horrendous. So what we need is a Torah portrait of what life is supposed to look like. And don't just pick on your favorite sin and condemn it and go protest in public and throw stones and because, oh, this sin, oh, I'm not going to put up with that one. But then again, you commit all the other. Come on. This is chaos.
It is. It is, and I'm getting overwhelmed just listening. I'm sorry to you. It's wonderful everything you're saying, but it's the solution does not seem to be apparent because to teach the whole world Torah in I don't know 10 days, is that real? Is that in a month?
Yes.
Is
Yes.
yes?
Because it's a matter of orientation. Just turn your attention in the right direction. The details will follow. But at least say, let's be moral. Let's hear what God has to say. Let's look at the world from God's perspective, because it's the only way we'll understand the world. It's like with any creation, any book. You want to understand the book, you have to put yourself in the author's shoes. What is the author trying to say? Your opinion of the book, that doesn't tell you what the book is. So how do we put ourselves in God's shoes? How do we try to imagine God's view? Obviously, we can't, unless he tells us. And so God did us a huge favor and actually described the world from his vantage point. That's why I think it would be so nice if we could produce a copy of the Torah in first person voice. Like instead of saying, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, we should say, in the beginning, I created heaven and earth. Because that's what it means. It's just that we kind of miss the punchline when we say it in third person. It's more dignified, it's more whatever, but we're very shallow. If you don't say it out loud, we miss it. So if we retranslated the Torah into, in the beginning, I created heaven and earth. And I told Adam not to eat from that tree. But he did. No one ever listens. So I had to remove him from the Garden of Eden, and I sent him out to work hard and make bread by the sweat of his brow, meaning to make this world good, you're going to have to sweat. But that's your job. Turn weeds into bread. And that's a metaphor for everything in life. But put it in the first person because that's what it is.
I would love to see Torah in Cliff Notes. Seriously.
Huh?
I said I would love to see Torah in Cliff Notes just so it's easier for people because um, actually what Jewish people did would actually made it a little bit more complicated by digging hard into it. I mean, it's great that we have all these details, but it's close to impossible to learn, especially if somebody just starts now. And especially
But
if
can
you're
you
not
imagine?
Jewish.
Yeah, can you imagine when the average person anywhere in the world is about to do something, about to get dressed, and they're wondering, does God have a preferred way of dressing, or is that completely not interesting to him? He dressed Adam and Eve. He made them the first suit. So imagine if the average person in the world would say, you know what? Let me find out. Let me call a rabbi and ask. So they don't know yet. They haven't studied it all. But the thinking is if you want to know whether something is right or wrong, make a phone call. Go online, find out what does God say about this? And don't just tell me to love God. That's like a bad marriage. I love you very much, but you demand too much. I love you, but I don't like the way you act, and I don't like the way you talk, and so just stop and let me love you. Stop everything. Stop with your opinions, stop with your needs, stop with your personality, and then I'll love you. I don't know. Love is very disappointing. If you don't have what to love, and if you don't love what you see, then what do you mean you love me? You don't like my opinion. You'll never go out of your way to do me a favor. What I ask for, you think is not important, but you love me. Uh, it's not a good deal. So we got to stop turning God into love or love into God. Listen to what he says. Listen to what he thinks of this world. To him, it's not mysterious. So the only right way to look at the world is through his eyes. That's what Jews have been doing for 4,000 years, trying to understand God's mysterious ways. Not just shrug it off and say, he knows what he's doing. If we're supposed to be partners with God, then we have to both know what the plan is. We have to have the same vision, the same goal, and the same tools for getting there. So going back to what you said before, ignorance, that is scary. Politicians, that's distasteful. But ignorance is frightening. And learning how to read and write is not the answer. Learning geography and history and literature, not the answer. We got to start with right and wrong, purpose, direction. You got to wake up in the morning and know why you wake up.
Rabbi Friedman, but the world for so long, at least 60 years, has been trying so hard to get God out of the picture in politics, the separation of state and God, religion rather, which is the same thing. So many things, people really tried very, very hard to become um, self-sufficient, self-serving, self-doing, whatever it is. And now it seems like the world is really turning around. And the question is, how can we help, all of us? how can we help the process?
You know, the president made a statement. I don't know if it was just a rush of words that just came out that way, or whether it was really intentional and thoughtful. And I'm not sure what he meant by it. But he made a statement that that the politics or the values of his opponent will hurt God. It'll hurt religion. It'll hurt people. But he said it'll hurt God. Well, everybody jumped on that as a sign of sheer ignorance, because God can't be hurt. My guess is that what he meant by that is it will hurt people's belief in God. It'll hurt God's reputation, but it won't hurt him. Maybe that's what he meant. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The question is the principle of the matter. Does God get hurt? Is he vulnerable? Most religion says he's not. He's too perfect. He's too great to be hurt by anything, certainly too big to be hurt by puny, tiny little man. If that's the case, then all of morality is optional. God says don't kill, don't murder. And if we do, well, he doesn't really care. It's your problem. You know, you're going to kill each other, there'll be nobody left. Too bad. That makes morality flimsy. It makes God flimsy. We're speaking to a 11-year-old boy. Obviously a bright boy, but still 11 years old. And he says, does God really need me to do all the mitzvahs, or does he just want me to do them? I simply said to him, you think God wants what he doesn't need? He said, oh, that's it. No further questions. Even for a human being, to want things you don't need is frivolous. It's immature. Like the child says, I need that toy. No, you don't really need it. You just want it. You want what you don't need. Well, you'll grow up and you become mature. You'll change your mind, because a mature person doesn't want what isn't necessary. Of course, you know, we can argue about what's necessary.
Also in the eyes of the beholder.
Right. But everybody admits that if you don't need it, why do you want it? It's clutter. So to accuse God of wanting to create a world that he doesn't need, of wanting us to behave a certain way where he doesn't really care, and there's no, you know, there's nothing, no investment in his part. That is godless. A God who doesn't care might as well not exist. So what does it mean that he does care? It means that it hurts. When we ignore him, when we violate his commandments, it hurts. If it doesn't hurt, then he doesn't care. If he doesn't care, then don't tell me he loves me. Now you're being absurd. He doesn't care, but he loves me. Is that not a contradiction? He loves you, but he doesn't really need you. So he loves you as long as you exist. If you die, he doesn't care. That is so, it's so insulting of us and of him. So yes, God gets hurt. He's invested in this world of his. And every human being he creates thoughtfully. It means something to him. I think the right way of saying it is God is eternal, so you can't damage him. But can you hurt him? Infinitely.
Wow.
See, there's the difference between God's emotions and ours. If he loves us infinitely, not the way human beings love, with conditions, only a certain amount of love. I can't be overwhelmed by it. I can only tolerate a certain amount of energy, and then I blow my fuses.
Hmm.
So his love is better than ours because it's infinite. His hurt is more real than ours because it's infinite. We get hurt, 2 days go by, we get over it, we forget. We can also be damaged. We can become dysfunctional because of all the hurt. He will not become dysfunctional from all the hurt, but the hurt is infinite.
Rabbi Friedman, one last question of today. Why should people trust the Jewish people? Why the people of the world should trust the Jewish people to know what they're talking about? Like us right now. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful. You have all the knowledge in the world, but people always question, how do you know better than the rest? What would be the answer to that?
God took the Jewish people out of Egypt, brought them to Mount Sinai, and said, "Get ready. I'm going to talk to you." He's going to talk to the entire people, not to the scholars, not to the prophets, not to the saints, to the entire people. There is so much power to that. How many people were there at the foot of Mount Sinai? Let's make an estimate. We know that there were 600,000 men of military age. That's between 20 and 60. So the 600,000 men between the ages of 20 to 60. Most of them had family. They had big families in those days. A conservative estimate would put it at about 2.5 million people. 2.5 million people, which makes sense because the population of Jews in Egypt was threatening to the Egyptians. Must have been a pretty big number. So there are 2 million people, 2.5 million people standing there. How many of them were brilliant? How many of them were learned? One tribe out of 12. God was talking to an average person, average intelligence, average education, average knowledge, and maybe even less than average because they were slaves. They probably knew more about Egyptian culture than they did about Jewish culture. And yet that's who God spoke to. Now, there are a few very powerful results number one, it's very hard to mislead people who were there themselves and heard it themselves and were being addressed themselves. It's very hard for one person to come along and say, God said, hey, we were there. He didn't say that. So you can't easily mislead an entire nation when they all heard the same thing. One person comes along and says, you weren't there, but God said something to me. I don't know. Either he did or he didn't. So what are the chances that what 2 million people heard was misinterpreted, misunderstood, tampered with, changed over the course of time, when they're all committed to preserving what they heard? If there was any change or any loss or addition, it's got to be tiny. The care with which the revelation at Sinai was passed on from teacher to student was impeccable. Rambam goes through a list. Who was it? Who was the leader who made sure that not a single word of the Torah was changed in each generation without a break? We know their names. We know who they were, where they lived, what they said. There's no break in the chain. So can we rely on what Jews know about God? Does Einstein understand the theory of relativity? If you want to know what God said, you go to the expert. Who is the expert? The one who devotes his entire life to studying, understanding, and teaching what was revealed at Sinai. Well, who does that? The Jewish people. The entire people. Not one or two guys. So is it reliable? It's the most reliable tradition in history.
Well, hopefully we'll get a lot of questions asked very, very soon, and hopefully, most importantly, we'll be able to answer them. So let's prepare. Let's prepare, Rabbi Friedman. Thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing time that you allocate for us. Thank you for your wisdom, for your inspiration, and for being with us every Tuesday. Thank God it's Tuesday. We can get some light into our week. So thank you very much for being with us. Until next week.
What your show, what your radio program.
Каждый вторник в
One
12:10.
second. This was an accident. I'm sorry. Please say.
I'm thrilled to be part of what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Because what you're doing is what everybody needs to be doing. It is the healthiest, the sanest, the wisest thing that we can do today.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you very much,
you.
and thank you for doing this with us and letting us complete our mission here. So we're all on the mission. Еще раз хочу очень сильно от души поблагодарить рэпа Мениса Фридмана за то, что он каждый вторник проводит с нами вот этот вот мудрый час, где мы можем услышать вечные слова мудрости и узнать что-то особое, и также зарядиться на всю оставшуюся неделю. Также хочу сказать, что по средам у рэба Мениса Фридмана есть класс, интерактивный класс на Zoom. Если кто-то заинтересован, пожалуйста, заходите. Организация называется itsgoodtoknow.org. It is good to know. И там можно присоединиться к этому классу в 9 вечера по средам. Так что не пропустите эту возможность. И вообще есть очень-очень много его видео, которые можно найти на разных сайтах в YouTube и также на его сайте Рэбби Менис Фридман. Так что, пожалуйста, воспользуйтесь этой возможностью. А пока что будьте здоровы, будьте счастливы, будьте благополучны и будьте разумны. Всем всего самого хорошего.
Каждый вторник в 12:10 один из самых известных раввинов нашего времени, Манис Фридман, в прямом эфире отвечает на вопросы наших слушателей. Вы услышите мнение самой мудрой книги человечества – Библии, о самых сложных проблемах, стоящих перед современным миром. Присылайте ваши вопросы заранее на наш имейл